Hello people of YouTube and welcome to Curiosity in Advance 2025, the very last Curiosity in Advance I'm doing in my 20s. Just as a quick reminder, the way this works is I ask myself questions one year, answer them the year after, and then ask myself more questions for the year that follow. For the last couple of years I've also included a couple of viewer questions, so if you have questions for 30-year-old Tom next year, put them in the comments below and I will get to them a year from now. So let's start there with the viewer questions from last year. Liz asks if we have a new dog yet, because Saga, our current dog, is old enough to get a sibling. And while Saga sure is old enough to get a sibling, this definitely wasn't the year for it. This year has been hectic for all sorts of reasons that I'll get to very shortly. A new dog was gonna bring that hecticity to a boiling point. I think it'll be another 2 or 3 years before Pooch the second enters the household. Liz's second question is if we're getting any closer to finding a permanent home to buy, which is a very good starting point for the theme of what this whole year has been and what this video is largely going to be about. I am currently sitting in the living room of our brand new 1970s home. It is very lovely, it needs a lot of work. We'll get to all of that shortly. Then a couple of questions from George, starting with what has been the best/worst kind of meeting you've had this year, which I think is a continuation on an answer I gave last year about one of the most memorable moments having been a particularly bad meeting with a client last year. We've taken a lot of the lessons from that meeting into this year, and I don't think any specific meetings this year have been as memorable as that one was. However, the best kind of meeting I've had this year is the kind where George announces that we've got the budget for a large self-produced journalist-ish video series all about sounds and music. Much more about that as the video progresses as well. Has George finished writing Sleipnir yet? George has done a lot of writing this year, but the majority of which on the series that I just mentioned, called The Story of the Sound. At the start of the year we got the green light to do 6 episodes of sort of Vox-like Cleo Abramy type videos, all about music and sounds and the human experience of such things. We've covered stuff like AI music generation versus real musicians in the studio. We've covered the allure of brass band competitions. We've covered how making music together is good for a kid's development. And so a ton of work, a ton of writing, none of which on Sleipnir in particular. That can stay on the to-do list for the years to come. How's money going? Are you rich yet? And the last one from George is how has your work-life balance been? And the answer to that really is just fine, I suppose. I don't usually have the tendency to work stupid amounts of hours, but because I work remotely and digitally basically all the time, it is very easy to get distracted by a host of things that aren't work. And when I do, sometimes, fairly regularly, I feel guilty and will work longer stupid hours into the evening. But that's far from all the time, and so really work life has been fine. The bigger challenge this year has been life in a way. So much of my time and mental capacity has been eaten up this year by the looking for a house and buying a house and losing out on bidding rounds and then finding the house that we ended up in and doing it up, that a lot of the other things that I like doing with my life, hobbies and bouldering and motorcycling, that's sort of fallen off to the wayside. Which is a pretty decent segue to the questions I asked myself last year. So question number 1 is the very obvious big one. Have you bought a house? That is nice. We have indeed, as I've already mentioned a bunch of times at this point, gotten ourselves a house. We went to the bank to talk about financing in January, then spent about half a year going to viewings, losing out on bidding rounds, and then on a fateful day in July, while we happened to be at the cabin with George and his family, we got the call that we won the bidding round on the house I'm sitting in right now. And it is genuinely just about the best house of all the houses we've seen and lost out on during our various bidding rounds. First of all, the location is absolutely spectacular. The most important thing to know is that we are surrounded by farms. It feels a bit like we are in the middle of nowhere, until you start looking at what is actually nearby. So just to mention a couple of things, within a minute's drive from here, there are 3 different food takeout places, if you don't count the 2 gas stations that are 2 minutes driving away. We are about a 5-minute drive away from the motorway and the nearest train station, also about 5 minutes away from like 3 different supermarkets. We are about 10 minutes away from Tønsberg, which is, in Norwegian context, a reasonably sized city. We are also about 10 minutes away from the ferry that goes across the fjord, which makes it a little bit easier for me to drive into Sweden and go to the Bigger Feet office every now and then. And then on top of all that, it's not just the location that is excellent, but it's also the place itself. You've got 2,000 square meters of garden, you've got a massive garage, you've got a pretty big house. Both the house and the garage, and honestly the garden, do want a lot of work. You can feel the age of the place a little bit. It's a house from the 70s. It's been done up in the meantime, so it's pretty reasonably maintained and the bones are still good, but we can feel the different priorities of residents past, if you will. So a lot of carpentry and getting the electrical system updated and rethinking the heating and getting a new kitchen and an updated bathroom and just a bunch of different stuff of that nature is in our immediate and medium to long distant future. This is very much a house where we can see ourselves grow old, but it's also gonna be a perpetual project. Question 2 is, what does your work situation look like now? Has it grown as fast as in the last year? Work has been good, but kind of weird. The story of the sound has been both a blessing and a bit of a curse in some ways. It was much easier than we expected to spend the allotted budget on it, both financially and temporally. I mean, getting the episodes made took a lot more time than we expected, which really that in itself we should have expected, because in our field, work always takes about 20 times as long as you expect it to. But we thought we allotted so much time and budget to each of these episodes that we sort of didn't think it would need or want more, which of course it did. Either way, we are really proud of the videos we've made. We are quite bummed by the fact that they haven't performed well or really at all, and partly because of the story of the sound, we haven't conjured up or done as much regular client work as we did the year before, and by extent not grown as much in the classical sense as we probably could have. We have, however, built a lot of skills and a lot of portfolio, which is a little bit intangible but also quite valuable, and we are going into 2026 with the assumption and ambition to make it a more, I think, regular year. Have you done any more solo and or motorcycle camping trips? I have indeed, and quite spectacularly too, I think. I've only had one little trip within Norway because, like I said, life has been eaten up by other aspects of life. But in the summer, I did go on a massive motorcycle trip all the way down to the Netherlands and camped along the way and back up. The most hilarious part of that is still that I did it on my teeny tiny Honda CRF 250L, which is not an appropriate touring bike whatsoever, and I will always treasure the memory of standing in the queue waiting for the ferry to Denmark and also on the way back, being surrounded by touring motorcycles and ADVs and other things that are meant for crushing highway miles, while I was getting ready for 800 arduous kilometers on a bike that is way too light in all the senses of that word. Good times. How many kilometers have you ridden on your motorcycle? Because this year it was about 6,000, which was more than the 2 years before, but I still think we can top that. I think this year it was about 4,500, not 6,000 like the year before, and I owe about 3,000 of it this year to that big trip to the Netherlands. So really, like I said, didn't do a lot of riding while in Norway here. Next year though, are you still riding around on your Honda CRF 250L? The only reason I'm asking this question again, even though I'm not especially optimistic about the answer, is that Frank and I have the goal of doing a motorcycle road trip down the coast of France and into Spain in 2026. August, if I remember rightly, because there is a full solar eclipse that's going to pass exactly over the north of Spain. So Spain is about 2,400 kilometers from the tippy top of Denmark, which is where my journey will actually start. That is if you take the motorways and go in as straight a line as possible. Frank and I have about 3 weeks to get this whole journey done and dusted. So the plan as it stands right now is that we start the first week by 4 or 5 days of just crushing motorway miles and getting down to Spain as relatively quickly as possible. Then we watch the solar eclipse in the north of Spain, maybe take a resting day or two, and then very slowly weave our way back up along the French coast to the Netherlands over the span of about 2 weeks. Which brings me to the motorcycle of it all, because the plan right now is quite seriously to sell my current motorcycle, the Honda CRF 250L that has served me so wonderfully over the last 3 years. Because 4 to 5 days of motorway riding on the CRF honestly sounds like my idea of hell. I should by March or April have saved up enough to get one of these, or one of these, or if we're lucky a second-hand one of these, or these, or these. Which, to the uninitiated, I am very aware that these all look the same. They aren't. Don't worry about it. What I actually really want is this, which I realize also looks the same, but isn't. Unfortunately, this hasn't existed for long enough yet that there's affordable enough options on the second-hand market, so that'll have to wait for another year or two. Did you do any actual language courses? I did indeed, though not for very long. At the start of the year, between January and March, I followed along with a Norwegian B1, B2 course, which was a little bit too easy for me, but unfortunately, there are no C-level courses, at least here in the area. If I wanted to do that, I think I need a private tutor, which kind of defeats part of the point, which was to not just go to a Norwegian course, but also meet a couple of nice people, which that part did happen. I just didn't learn that much extra Norwegian being there. I haven't really looked into French courses at all, largely because I'm saving money for a motorcycle and I'm literally not spending it on anything else. But my Duolingo streak is now at 630 days and I can start to feel the need to practice speaking and listening more than typing and learning vocabulary. So post motorcycle, I guess that is something to learn into, but for the time being, just doing Duolingo, going pretty well. And of course, the usual at the end, what are the most memorable moments of 2025? There are a lot, because Jesus Christ, what a year. But first of all, no funerals. So that's been kind of pleasant. From January to the summer, it's been a bit of a black hole memory and memorable moments wise, because of all our time being taken up by going to viewings, bidding on houses, being depressed about losing out on houses and doing that over and over and over again. But there are a few highlights, particularly the extracurricular activity that George and I did of going to the United States and filming a bunch of stuff for a couple of episodes of The Story of the Sound. This was definitely back when we thought our budget would stretch a little bit further than it ended up doing. But fair is fair, it was a delightful week, both because of the work we got done, but also because of the touristy stuff we got done in addition. All of the activities we did mean we had to do a lot of driving. We had rented a brand new BMW, which I think had 7 miles on the odometer when we got it. It had horrendous turbo lag and also the worst driver's side rear view mirror I've ever seen in my life. Is this a common thing in the United States? Are all driver's side rear view mirrors like stupidly zoomed in? Because I can only imagine that whoever had that idea initially and approved it had tunnel vision and wasn't able to see the slower moving, weirdly unnaturally zoomed in perspective in his peripheral vision at all times. Because to me, that was a fabulous distraction that was ever present while driving that car. Truly a baffling decision in car design. Just give me a normal mirror with a normal perspective. Anyway, as usual, the food in the US was fantastic. The brisket in Louisville, just spectacular. The breakfast at a random Waffle House, iconic. The Mexican food outside of Birmingham was just the most Moorish food I've ever had. And the limited run key lime shakes from Chick-fil-A were just the best guilty pleasure of milkshake I've ever had. Also, the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to go to the Barber Vintage Motorcycle Museum was absolutely a dream come true. And I could keep rambling about the utter bizarreness that was Buc-ee's and the wild oversized log cabin that was Bass Pro Shop, or the super warm welcome of Diane of the Louisville Leopards. Suffice it to say that our trip to the US was really wonderful, and came at the right time, I think, because if the opportunity had come up now and not 3/4 of a year ago, I probably would have refused to go because gestures broadly. Right, memorable moments beyond our trip to the US. George and I and Hannah also went to Stavanger for more filming, which was fantastic. The weather was lovely, the brass band we were there for was spectacular, and the work-life balance of that weekend, to bring it back to George's question at the start, was really nice. Signe and Saga and I also went on a single camping trip this year, but this trip, despite being fairly early in the season and it still being chilly, was really nice. I remember it especially well because of the odd kind of tree cave we set our tent up in to have it sheltered from the rain a bit better. Then of course, winning the bid on this house was, beyond anything else, such a relief. By the time we won this house, we were both so done with the whole process of finding a house in the first place. The fact on top of that, that it was this house specifically, and it ticks basically all the boxes we were hoping for, cherry on top. But the feeling of relief when we got the call from the real estate agent, just indescribable. I also want to make note, not as a specific memorable moment, but a memorable gesture, I guess, of the amount of help we got from others getting the house and the garden into a presentable shape, with specific honorable mentions to my mom and Signe's mom and Frank, who all came to stay here for 10+ days to help out with tidying up in the garden and painting and ripping down wallpaper and that sort of stuff. Very, very grateful for that. Then a specific memorable moment is Frank and I riding my motorcycle on a beach in Denmark. First of all, riding on a beach is not really a thing you can do in a lot of places that I've experienced. So that in itself being a possibility, fantastic. But also getting to do it on my little Honda, extra good, because while it is wildly inappropriate to ride from the tip of Denmark to the Netherlands, being on a beach and playing in the sand is the ideal setting for that motorcycle. So it was just so wonderful. It happened while the sun was setting, we had childish fun ripping around through the sand. Just such a wonderful moment. Another similar feeling one is when my mom and I went to hike for a day on Schiermonnikoog this summer. And at the end of the day, we were waiting for the ferry to dock and shared a couple of bottle caps of this spiced bitter called Lutje Pole, which is a drink you can only buy on the island. It's spiced delightfully, it's sweet, it's warming after a day of hiking. It's a really delightful way to cap, pardon the pun, a really delightful day. Also an island, but very different vibes. For Signe's dad's 60th birthday week, we were all invited to go down to Gran Canaria, and the warmth and relaxation lingers with me until this very moment. Also very warm and relaxing was Signe's scheme to get me to a spa to celebrate our 10th anniversary, which especially with this hectic mess of a year was a delightful weekend away. And we should, when we can, definitely do it again. One of the most memorable things about moving into this house was fetching that sofa behind me. We had bought it secondhand, and the weekend we were gonna go pick it up, we got a message from the seller that people were putting up scaffolding all around the building she was living in, and it was set up so tight that the sofa wouldn't go through. So we had to wait 2 months to go and pick it up. Then, when it was finally time, we'd booked a rental van, and realized when we went to pick up the van that it was definitely not going to be big enough to fetch the sofa, and we needed to go all the way to Oslo to pick it up. So we are very glad that we measured the back of the van we originally rented, because when we realized we went back in, we were able to get another van on short notice that was actually meant to go in for maintenance and not be rented out again, but was fine to just go up and down to Oslo. Got the sofa, got it in the house, and that really started tying together this living room. More than memorable, that was just stupid and convoluted. Then the last memorable moment, and this is extremely recency biased because it happened 3 or 4 days ago, is I shaved my hair off. There's a couple of reasons for this. One is that my hair here is getting fairly thin because I guess I have unfortunate genetics and I'm almost 30. So this was getting thinner and I was getting more and more displeased with it, and having used minoxidil for a couple of years, it didn't really seem to do very much at all. So in that sense, it was time. It was also time because, once again, I am trying to save all the money that I can for buying a different motorcycle. Part of that is not wanting to go to the hairdresser ever again, because it costs 600 kroner, or about 50 euros, every time I go to the hairdresser. And that money can very well be spent elsewhere. Obviously, I don't like it very much because it feels like I had to do it, but at the same time, I wasn't immediately horrified when I looked in the mirror after doing it. So it'll take some time to get used to it, and it'll be fine. Which finally brings me to the questions I want to ask my 30-year-old self a year from now. So question 1, what is the biggest standout project or change that has happened to the house in the last year? Did the garden party in June pan out roughly as you are hoping it will pan out? You've got a bunch of stuff in storage at Signe's grandparents' house in Trondheim. Did you finally go and fetch it? What motorcycle did you end up getting? And if going to Spain all ended up according to plan, how was its long distanceness in comparison to the CRF? You have built that coffee table recently, and before that the stairs and doors to the basement. So beyond stuff like painting and patching things, is there anything you've built in the last year? What work thing are you most proud of? Are there any specific standout projects or any unexpected growth? Possibly any new tools you've learned? You're sort of starting to get into Blender more and more, so did you do anything cool with Blender, for example? And naturally, to cap it all off, what are the most memorable moments of 2026? If any viewers have made it to the end, thank you very much for watching, and don't forget to put your questions for 30-year-old Tom down there in the comments. Can be anything, stupid or intelligent, I will answer it all, probably. Thank you ever so much for watching, and don't forget to push some of the positive buttons down below as well, and I will see you, I suppose, a year from now. Ciao!